All right. So good afternoon. And I'm really happy to see everybody today for the first of two sessions that we're going to be doing to cover basic meditation instruction and what it means to be a meditation instructor. As many of you know, the history of this session is that it was requested by Stephen Kropf for the folks here at Athens because the pandemic has really thrown a lot of us for a loop. It's been very difficult and stressful personally for individuals. It's also been the cause of a great deal of suffering from people who have lost loved ones to the disease, to those who have essentially lost their community by not being able to meet with their recovery groups or with their families or with their church or religious groups. So because of all of these different things, it's just been a heck of a year. And Stephen and I were talking about what is the biggest skill that would be needed by people at the KTC in Athens to help cope with all of this. And one of the things we hit upon was that it would be just great if we could train people to teach meditation. Because what we have found in Columbus, Ohio, at the KTC in Columbus, what we found is that when people take on the responsibility to share the dharma that they know, when people have taken on the responsibility to share the dharma with other people, their own practice increases. So I've already, spoiler alert, I've already given you the secret that my compatriot Daryl Peters said he usually likes to save until later in the program. When Daryl Peters would teach meditation instruction, he would wait a little while before he said, and there's a secret. And the secret is your practice gets better when you start sharing the dharma that you know. So there's several reasons why it would be interesting and also constructive, and personally constructive and organizationally constructive to share meditation teaching methods with you. So the original idea was that we would start this in late August, and that in August, and then Stephen would be able to participate. But as it happens, we've been so busy in Columbus with the construction of the center that we have had I've had personally virtually no time to do anything. So it's been really tough for me to get myself to get additional things organized and scheduled in. So I'm sorry for that part, but we are recording these, and you can watch them later, and you can also we'll share these with Stephen when he gets back. So that's a little bit about how this all came about. And I am really looking forward to talking to all of you about Dharma, because it's something that I've been working with for about, oh gosh, shall we say 25 years, 40 years. I've been a Dharma student for about 40 years. And then I have been the resident teacher of Columbus KTC for about 25 years. So it's been a long time. Khenpo Karthar RInpoche was the person who I think first really hit upon this secret, which is that when you teach other people Dharma, your practice improves. When he, in 1988, which was quite a while back for everyone here, but in 1988, he gave a lesson to us KTC members about how to teach and work with new people. And this became the basis of two of the documents I shared with you recently, the advice about newcomers, and also some of the basics about meditation instruction. We'll be talking about those later on. But the handouts I sent you the links for earlier this week are things that he talked about in 1988. And some of them are things that we put together in Columbus KTC subsequent to that. to kind of codify and list and write down what his advice was. So that's what I'm going to be basing my presentations on. This is the first time I've given a program of this type. Therefore, since it's the first time, I'm sure that I will be learning along the way about what materials are best to share. So thank you for being my guinea pigs as I try to find ways to share this information with Dharma centers. So because the Columbus KTC and the Athens KTC are, I like to call as sibling centers, then it's apparently it's okay for me to give you this kind of instruction. Normally in the old days, KTD monastery reserved the right to give this type of instruction to KTCs and the members of KTCs. But at the centers where there are resident teachers or centers that are under the guidance of a resident teacher, whether it's in their city or elsewhere, those centers do have some leeway. So I'm sneaking through what I perceive to be a little of that leeway to share this with you as an experiment to see if it's helpful to you individually and to the center as an organization. So as I warned you a few minutes ago, as Michael was joining, Michael, you didn't hear this one, but as I mentioned a few minutes ago, what I'd like to start with is getting a list from you of things you want to make sure you learn in these 2 meetings that we're going to have. Some of them we'll get to this week, some of them we'll get to next week. So you can unmute yourself, and if you have trouble unmuting, I'll just hit ask to unmute on everybody because I'm working on that, and then you can remute yourself afterward. Anybody have something they'd like to share about what they'd like to learn?
Yeah, I'd like to know, so if I give, so what we're changing up how we do our meditation and giving a brief overview of meditation before we start.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I leave out? What's important to keep in when I make it brief?
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good.
Good.
Okay, great. Okay. Anything else?
Not yet.
Okay, cool.
Maybe later.
And you can type into chat anytime, any questions that might arise for you. So anybody else have something they want to make sure they learn?
I have a question, and that is, what is the appropriate context to teach this? So obviously this is something we would be doing for newcomers, which would be great at our meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But like people will ask me, it comes up, you know, and I, like my son is, you know, is this okay to share with somebody who's not within the context of the KTC Center?
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I can definitely address that. Okay, great.
Yeah, kind of a parallel question to Catherine's is like, I have a friend that I think would, because of his health situations, you know, probably benefit from some meditation practice and so forth. So I was wondering about, you know, sort of helping him along. But the other thing, you know, and probably the main reason that I signed up for this is just to really be able to sort of refine and sharpen my own practice to a large degree, so that so that I know what, you know, or at least, you know, I have a little more confidence that I might be doing the right thing as opposed to making something up. So that's
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are good. Those are good things to ask about. And yeah, we can definitely, and this is why I like doing this kind of class, because I do feel it helps us to solidify what we've already learned and solidify and expand what we've already learned.
Also, I guess I'd like to know a little more about what happens past shamatha.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like I understand, you know, this is pretty much the basic training, but it's basic training for something.
Sure.
So
you got it.
Yeah.
I can answer that. Okay, very good. Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else have something they'd like to make sure that we cover today or in our meetings?
I'm not great at meditating, and I'm wondering.
Nancy, go ahead, please, and Stephen, we'll take you next.
I'm not that great at meditating. I'm still working hard on it. And I'm wondering if it's appropriate for me to teach, but I can't do very well.
Well, here's the thing. What I'm going to say next, what I'm going to be talking about next is the process that we use in Columbus for choosing meditation instructors. Everyone who undergoes the course will not necessarily become an instructor. It could actually be that they just inform their own practice, because it is an application process at our center. And then there's the training is only just one part of that process. So I appreciate you asking about it. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And I think it's fine because as Jeff was mentioning, as we learn more about technique and so on, it's going to help our own practice to learn more about the techniques. It'll help us. And then we'll have an idea of what are reasonable expectations, both of ourselves and others, because here's one of the problems. One of the lamas, I think it was Ponlop Rinpoche, he said, we tend to overjudge our practice. And by overjudging our practice, we actually feel a little bit of, he didn't use the word stage fright, but he said by overjudging our practice, we tend to belittle our practice and then do less of it. Because we think, oh, well, our practice isn't any good, so why do I bother? And so on and so forth. And so part of what we're trying to learn in Dharma is we're trying to learn healthy habits of thinking and healthy expectations for ourselves and healthy expectations for others. And that helps us to bring about mental stability and what the Buddha liked to call the middle path. The Buddha taught a middle path that was free from the extremes of yes and no, good and bad, and so on. He would like for all of us to be a little bit more in the middle about everything. So I think it's great to feel that you have a shortcoming you want to correct. That's awesome. And so we're going to look into that and see what the reasonable expectations are, because it could actually be, it's possible. I'm not saying it is, but it's actually possible that your meditation is actually quite good, but because you're using a different metric to judge your meditation, you're not judging it accurately. So it could actually be that your meditation is actually quite good. But again, it depends on the metrics. And that's one of the things we're going to be learning in the class is what metrics to judge by. So we're here for you. Nancy, did you have anything more before we move on to Stephen? Okay. All right. Stephen, yeah, what would you like to hear?
Well, first, let me just say I got a lot out of those three things that you attached. Those are great, and I especially found interesting the brief comparison of the three yanas there: Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. But got something out of all of those. The thing is probably the same thing that Jeff is asking about, but it reminded me of a question that came up when I was reviewing this book, The Dawn of Tantra, which I'd read 40 years ago, first time. But anyway, it concerns. He talks about vipassana and shamatha. I guess that may be what you're talking about. Will be next. But anyway, I just thought I'd ask about vipassana if that's something different.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yes, and I will address that. Because you're right. It is part of the what's next question. So you're very astute. Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to make sure? Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to make sure they hear today? Okay.
I don't know about anybody else, but I hear an echo. You are repeating yourself.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know what to do about it, except I will go ahead and mute the microphones now.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and mute microphones now. So this should stop the echo. Okay. Yeah, I don't exactly know what causes it myself. There's some latencies in the audio track that for some folks because of their wireless service or their Wi-Fi service. So I think that that because of that delay, it's arising in some people's speakers because of their download speed or whatever, so there's like lots of reasons why that ghost track might appear. So, okay. So I'm going to start with a short prayer in English, and you can be with me in heart and mind as I recite this short prayer, taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha for the benefit of beings. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the order most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they have that great happiness, which is freedom from suffering. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. Halden sawe Lama Rinpoche, dagi chiwar pede denshula, kadran jembugone jesunte, kusam tuking a drip saldu so. I don't have a proper translation for this, but essentially that last prayer is, kind root Lama who is seated on a lotus blossom above my head, please bless me with your body, speech, and mind. Okay, thanks. So, sharing the Dharma. I think one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up the two one of the handouts that let's see if I can make it happen. Yep, there it is. Let's see. Yep, there we go. This is what Khenpo Karthar RInpoche shared with us way back. And he said that there's a proper attitude for people who are sharing the Dharma. And in general, he said, in the material world, the purpose of education and so forth is to allow students to gain some peace and happiness in life. This is the overall purpose of a material education, is for students to achieve happiness during this life. And then he said, while the benefits of mundane education will help the student, sometimes there is an attitude of selfishness imparted in the educational process. And this selfishness that's imparted, he says, tends to give a strong tendency toward attachment to self. And as long as there's a strong tendency to attach to the self, you might dislike or fear others. Therefore, as a result of your early training, you here in America, you have never really been able to produce a pure mind free from this dualistic idea of self and others. And it's as he said to us one time, he said, look, this isn't your fault. He said, this is the fault of the system you live in. And because your society is not built around religion, but instead is built around material happiness, he said, you're going to fall into this problem. So he said, when you begin to learn and teach the Dharma, the attitude you adopt is quite different for the one that you were brought up with. In the Dharma, you look forward to benefiting others. You hope to cultivate the Dharma in the minds of others for their own benefit. And this is true whether you are a student or a teacher. And so he said, therefore, people involved in Dharma need to develop a great altruistic attitude that's completely free of selfishness. Well, we're not perfect beings yet, so we're going to do our best to have a mind that is, shall we say, relatively less involved with dualism. That's maybe how we might consider it. So in any case, that's what he's hoping for us to understand. He said this is known as developing the vast or infinite attitude. And so he's saying this vast attitude is the frame of reference, the ground from which you will act in all situations. And it should be the underlying attitude of anyone who teaches the Dharma to others. In addition to this basic attitude, there are several other points. So he's really driving home the point here that even though we need to be aware of the subject we are sharing, and that we are sharing as accurately as we can the subject, what we mainly have to cultivate before we even begin to teach is this attitude of wishing to be of benefit to everyone. If we can remember that even hearing the Dharma, hearing any instruction related to Dharma is a blessing for the individual who hears it, if we remember that even a slight connection to Dharma is a powerful thing for this person that we're talking with and their future lifetimes, this is, it might make us feel a little nervous because it is a momentous thing to happen in this person's life, but it also will inform us as to the amount of gentleness and kindness and the intentionality we have in approaching this person. And he's going to talk a little bit about this as he goes along. For example, he will say, don't speak down to people. Don't put on airs thinking that you are better than that person, and so on. He'll be talking about this in a minute. But this vast attitude is what we need to at least artificially generate. Okay, we have to artificially generate it at first, because at first we're very concerned about the material and as to whether we're sharing the material properly and if we're giving the instructions correctly. We will have that concern. But before that comes this wish to be of benefit to others. Does anybody have questions about that? And I do believe that you can unmute yourself for the purpose of asking questions, or if you prefer, you can put them in chat. Maybe I have questions about this vast attitude. Okay. All right. So then we'll go to the next subject, which is points to remember. The first is, he says, teach only what you know. This is the most valuable lesson I learned. He said, first point is to remember, in order to properly present the Dharma, is to teach only the Dharma that you have accurately learned. Now, this is hard for us in this country because we're used to knowing everything about the subject we're talking about. We're used to being able to present ourselves as an expert. We have an education, we've got some degrees, and we are going to share what we know. So we're used to having that kind of attitude. And if somebody asks us a question that we don't know anything about, we might be fearful and might wish to save face and avoid embarrassment by giving an answer that we think might be right, but also could be wrong, just so that we don't look bad in front of our students. And he's actually telling us, don't be like that. So he's saying a teacher should only present those truths that have been understood. You don't need to use the exact words in which you were taught, but it's important that you have understood the teaching yourself and that you convey the essential meaning. And so he said, otherwise, your words will be in error, he says. He doesn't want your words to be in error. And if you don't want that to happen, then only present what words seem suitable in terms that won't cause confusion. I see, so there's a question here, and I'll make sure that I answer that in a minute. And he said, that's the first point in the proper method. However advanced you may become in your practice, you may learn, whatever you may learn, however much study, this should be your guideline. Teach only what you are sure you understand, and teach it clearly in words that are appropriate, giving thought to what you will say before you say it. Now, Jeff's question is, how does one know the truths that have been understood? Is there a self-test? I think that as you rehearse these topics, because you're going to be rehearsing the teaching of meditation. And if you're leading a book discussion, many of the things in a book discussion will be explained in the book itself. So it will be important for you to annotate or underline or make notes if you don't like to write in books, to make notes to yourself about the key points to every chapter. That way, when you're leading a book discussion, you already know what you know, and you already know what you don't know. Frequently, and this happens to me all the time, people will ask me a question and I'm not sure I have the answer. So I'll stop for a moment and consult my store of teachings and see if I can find a match for their question. If I can't, the most important thing Rinpoche told me to do, because if I don't know something for sure, I think you'll know that, I know that, and I'm assuming because I know it that you'll know it. But there might be some cues, such as if you feel a lapse in your memory, like, well, I'm not sure about this, or you feel a pang of embarrassment at a question, that could be an indicator that you don't fully understand or know the answer. But it's easier if you keep notes with you. That's going to be really the best thing, because then if you keep notes with you as you speak, you'll make sure you cover the basic points. What we ended up doing in Columbus was we ended up creating an objectives list for every class. These are not academically generated. None of us really know what we're doing when we make a list of learning objectives. We're just, I guess you could say we're spitballing it, but at least if you go over that list before you make your presentation of what you want to make sure that you talk about, that'll be helpful. Did that answer your question, Jeff? Or did you have more?
Yeah, pretty much so basically, it seems like if you can go back to an authoritative source, then you're probably saying the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel queasy inside, then maybe you should just say, I don't know.
That's correct.
Move on.
In fact, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche instructed me that the powerful words in this situation, the three powerful words are, I don't know. I don't know. He said, don't be afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to say it. And because he said, if you're afraid to say it, then you will always be at risk of saying something just to look, so that you don't think you look stupid. You know what I'm saying? Because we have this, we have enough vanity as human beings to think that it matters that people think we're an expert on something. But I try myself whenever I'm teaching to let people know when I don't know. And in fact, I have to tell you something. I am not a Buddha, therefore I'm not beyond liking and disliking things. One of the coolest things Khenpo Rinpoche ever said about me is when he was talking to a group about me and said, hey, at least she always says when she doesn't know something. So I may not be a genius, but I at least know when to say I don't know. And so anyhow, and yes, and what Rinpoche said you could do when that happens, he said, if you have an inkling, if you have an idea of where you can look it up, even if you don't know the answer, if you know where you can look it up, say to the person who's asking the question, sorry, I don't have the answer for that, but I know where to look it up and I'll get back to you about it. Or you can write me an email and then I'll answer, or whatever. That way, it's not that you're telling the person, you're not just pushing them along or sloughing them off. You're saying, I care about your understanding of this, and I care about my own understanding of it. So we're going to both learn something. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any others on this? Okay. Eliminate feelings of superiority. I've already talked about this once, but I'm going to say it again. Rinpoche says the second point to remember when you're presenting Dharma to people, especially to those who have no knowledge of it, it's essential to feel openness toward them without feeling that you are superior and the students are inferior. Don't think like that. You must regard your listeners as beings equal to yourself. So that's very important. You must consider yourself as a doctor, simply trying to benefit them by prescribing the medicine that will overcome their sickness. Many people have noted over the centuries in Buddhism that the Buddha was the physician, the Dharma was the medicine, and the students were the patient. So they've used this physician, medicine, patient analogy for centuries to describe what's going on. And in fact, here Rinpoche uses that by saying their sickness is confusion. And what you are prescribing is the medicine that will eliminate confusion. So it's really important. And I have fallen into this error, and I'm sure all of you will fall into it at some point, especially if you have someone in a small group who is challenging you and is making a play to be the leader of the group that you're trying to lead. They will often attempt to show that you don't know anything and that they're smarter than you and so forth. Khenpo Karthar RInpoche said, you know, he said, you're the facilitator of the group, so it's okay for you to do what you have to do to continue to lead the group. You know, and that includes saying, you know, we're not going to talk about that now, or we're going to talk about that later, or boy, I really appreciate your questions or whatever. And sometimes what I've done, oh, and the other thing he said, like sometimes he says people ask questions out of arrogance. And he says, you're going to be able to spot this right away because they will be showing off something that they learned that they think is at odds with what you have taught. And so then they're setting up a situation. One of you has to be right and the other has to be wrong. And I personally would recommend that people try to defuse that type of scenario and to basically talk about what you think might be going on. For example, my favorite one of these was that somebody said to Khenpo Rinpoche, well, you know, how did they put it? I think that attachment is a real problem, just like the Buddha thought. But you know what the real attachment is? It's attachment to dharma. You should just throw the dharma out. You don't need dharma because if you are attached to dharma, that's bad. So what do you have to say to that, huh? You know, and so he kind of, in this accusing manner, threw this question at Rinpoche. And he said, I understand this question. So first thing he does is he says, I understand this question. I hear your question. And I understand that it looks like it's a contradiction to, you know, to be attached to dharma. But let me give you a real life example, he said. Using your same philosophy, let's use an example. He says, you're in a boat rowing, and you're rowing across a pond. Okay, you're rowing across this pond and rowing across the pond. And then halfway across the pond, you think to yourself, hey, I shouldn't need this boat. I should be able to just walk to the other side, of course. And then you get out of the boat and attempt to walk on top of the water. And then you'll sink like a stone and you'll drown. So he said, here's your situation. Your logic is that you should abandon the dharma because attachment to it is bad. But you know, you have to be attached to the dharma until you reach the other shore of enlightenment. And so you have to be attached to dharma until you reach the other shore, just as you would have to stay in that boat and be attached to that boat until you get to the other side and avoid drowning. So he used this type of situation to help people understand without saying that they were bad or wrong. He just used logic. Another young person said, I don't believe in this rebirth and reincarnation business, and I just don't believe in past and future lives. And Rinpoche basically said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in yesterday? And the person said, well, of course, yesterday happened. Yes, I believe in yesterday. And he said, do you believe in tomorrow? And the young person said, well, of course, it's coming up. I believe in tomorrow. And he said, well, then you believe in reincarnation and you believe in rebirth, because yesterday and tomorrow are connected by today. And it is continuously moving, and it has been continuously moving since the no beginning of time. So in a way, you actually do believe in reincarnation and rebirth, because you're a different person today than you were yesterday. And yesterday's is different from the day before, and so on. I don't know if the young person really understood the analogy, but it's another way of dealing with questions that can upset our equilibrium and so on. You probably will not get questions like this. Mostly people go after folks who are perceived to be experts in a field. They're not interested in taking on us who are just teaching meditation at the local group level. So I think it's going to be less of a problem. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, good. Teach to the capacity of students. Third, if you continue to teach the Dharma as you continue to teach and meet more students, you'll see that not all students are equal. Some are very sharp, very quick, and others who are slower to understand. In the case of the student who is slow, when a teacher has tried one way to explain, then another, and still the student does not grasp the ideas, sometimes it's natural for the teacher with insufficient inner experience or practice to become discouraged. Now, you might wonder why he is saying a person who has insufficient inner experience. Well, what he means by this is that he means that as we become more experienced in the Dharma, both in our own meditation practice and in other ways, we will know that every student is built differently. This is something I've really come to understand in the 25 years that I've been teaching. Students are all completely and utterly different from one another, and their learning styles are completely and utterly different from each other. They are as rare and unique as snowflakes. So, so because of that, I know that it is not possible for me to get through to everyone, because I may not have the karma to be able to teach the multitudes. And really, until the moment of the first level of Bodhisattva awakening, the first level of Bodhisattva awakening is when people begin to be able to express Dharma to different people in different ways simultaneously. So until that happens, we're stuck with the subject, object, and teaching methodology of dualism. So he said, it's natural for a teacher with insufficient inner experience. In other words, we're not as patient. We don't recognize that everybody will understand in their own way and in their own time, and that it's not our fault that they don't understand something. Part of it is their karma. He says, and sometimes we'll not only become discouraged, the teacher might also look down on the student, thinking that the student has limited wisdom, which might lead the teacher to avoid or reject. And so he's basically saying this feeling of discouragement should not arise. What he's saying, it's not that it shouldn't arise, but you shouldn't entertain it. Because yes, you may have these thoughts, but you don't have to maintain these thoughts. He says the proper attitude is that you must try your best to put into the mind of each student whatever knowledge he or she is capable of understanding, not giving more information that's needed or can be understood. Thus, you do not exceed the student's capacity, but rather limit yourself to the capacity, whatever it is. And he uses the example of an infant, that you don't give adult foods to an infant, but advance them slowly, slowly, slowly. Likewise, as one who is revealing teaching, you have to be skillful enough to present the Dharma that individuals can accommodate in their minds, in their heads, as they say in the West, or in their minds. Teachers should be honest and open. All three previous points dealt with the attitude of the teacher of Dharma towards students. The next point, the fourth one, is concerned not directly, so directly with your own attitude toward others, but more with yourself and your own openness and honesty, your own level of practice, insofar as you feel you have an ego, and insofar as you feel you have an ego, a self-image to protect. You should always bear in mind that the truth of the Dharma is very vast and the meaning is very profound, and that while presenting a teaching on some aspect of this vast and profound subject, many questions may arise that you'll be unable to answer. When this happens, do not lie. In this situation, in order to protect your own identity, you may want to give an answer when that you're not sure of. So here he is again, reminding us to always be ready to say you don't know. And then he says, remember that when you speak with assurance, words that you are not sure are correct, even without any formed negative intention, without intending to spread error or confusion, you're lying. And so this is why we do confession prayers each and every day, so that when somebody says, do I look nice in this haircut? And you want to lie and say, oh, that's just beautiful. That's why we every day make confession prayers. And so being aware that we don't want to spread error and confusion, and that we don't want people to misunderstand. So it's better to say, I don't know. So again, he says, when you are asked a question that you don't answer, it's very important for you not to protect your diploma, so to speak, but rather to be open, admit that you don't know. Or you could say something like, I'm not clear, I'd like to think about it, answer later. And so now he restates the proper method of teaching is to present only that which you've understood. And that means admitting ignorance, so checking some cloudy points. Something that I have done in this regard before is sometimes when I don't know the answer, I will say, well, I don't know the answer to this question, but let's talk about the subject a little bit and see if we can learn something from talking about the subject. And so that's what I'll do sometimes. I say, well, we'll talk around it a bit and see if we can get anywhere. And sometimes talking around the subject gives them enough information to get them started. And then I can come back to them later with more information. So then to summarize, he says, this is a very general outline of the attitude that you should cultivate as a teacher of the Dharma. It should be clear and always kept in mind that it's a very general explanation. It describes the overall attitude. But then, as Stephen was noting earlier, the part he liked about this article was each of the vehicles has a slightly different attitude. But no matter what the vehicle, the previous points about proper attitude should always be observed. And then there are some specific points in the three vehicles. But before I move on to that, I want to see if anybody has any questions about any of these previous points about teaching only what you know, not feeling superior, not making things up, teaching to the level of the student, and so on. Does anybody have any questions about these points? Okay, well then in that case, this would be a good time then for our 10-minute break. So I'm going to pause the recording, turn off the microphone and the video, and I will get up and move around, and then I will be back. I'm going to set my timer and come back in 10 minutes. So that looks to me like it'll be somewhere around 5 to 7 minutes past the hour. So we'll see you in a few minutes. All right, thanks for coming back. So we've covered the basic attitudes that people need to have if they're going to be sharing the Dharma with others. And so now we're going to talk about the three specific points in the three vehicles. So he says here, this is Khenpo Karthar RInpoche again speaking. he says, since the specific attitude appropriate in presenting the Dharma is not the same in all three vehicles, here's a brief explanation of the attitudes for each vehicle. Now, we're not going to be really digging deeply into this, but I mean, I could skip this part because it's not what we're going to be talking about today, but I thought I would do it just so we can say we did, so we can say we did cover it. And then we will circle back to it later when we talk about teaching Introduction to Buddhism, because today we're just going to be talking about Introduction to Meditation. Okay, Hinayana means it's the vehicle of individual liberation. Some people call it the smaller vehicle, not because it's lesser or anything like that, but because the attitude with which one is studying it is for one's benefit alone. So he says in the Hinayana tradition, which is also known as the vehicle of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, you can look this up in the Dharma Dictionary, and I will include the Dharma Dictionary. I'll send you a PDF of something that KTD published called the Dharma Dictionary. It's very nice. It's just a small glossary, and I think you'll enjoy reading it. Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are those who achieve deep states of meditation, and they rest in a peaceful state of meditation in which they cut the cause for rebirth in samsara, but they don't achieve full awakening because they're still clinging to the peace of meditation. So in the Hinayana tradition, which is also known as the vehicle of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, everyone, the person presenting the Dharma, as well as those who are listening, are regarded as being in jail, meaning they're in samsara, the person presenting the Dharma, as well as the people who are hearing it. The teacher is in jail and the students are in jail. So the aim of the teacher who is presenting the Dharma is to free everyone, oneself included, from the jail. If we translate more literally from the Tibetan, we would say they are freed from, they are out of the fence. To accomplish this, the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha students and teachers develop detachment from samsara. They try to escape the fearful state to the happiness of blissful nirvana. You yourself and the teachers are also trying to escape, and you're also trying to help others. That is the Shravaka and the Pratyeka Buddha view. Now, I know very little about this other than what Rinpoche has stated here, but at least it gives you an idea of where people are coming from. In the Mahayana tradition, the attitude of the teacher toward the students is like a mother and son. If a mother sees that her son is drowning, then without any thought of herself, her clothes, or her own life, she jumps into the water to rescue the drowning son. She doesn't care much about what happens to herself. The main objective is to save her son. The point here is that not much thought is given to the importance of the self. Similarly, in the Mahayana tradition, the teacher regards others as more important, as having greater need than himself or herself. And with this in mind, the teacher presents the Dharma, such as the Mahayana tradition. So, whereas the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats gained their realization by meditating deeply and feeding a fear of samsara so that they work really hard. Those of you who remember the 37 actions of a bodhisattva will remember that that one verse that says, if Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas who are working for their own benefit alone practice as though there was a fire burning on their heads, then for the benefit of others to practice the Mahayana with equal fervor is the practice of a bodhisattva, something of that nature. I have to go back and read it to be sure. But the idea here is that the word Shravaka means hearer. Literally, one hears the Dharma. That's what Shravaka means. And Pratyeka Buddha means self-made Buddha. And a self-made Buddha, according to some people, only arise in the interregnum in history when the teachings of one Buddha have died out before the teachings of another Buddha are established. Some people say that the only Pratyeka Buddhas that exist are those who lived in this interregnum, because there was nobody to teach the Dharma, but they figured out the 12 links of interdependence and were able to, through their meditation, unravel them. So they were self-made Buddhas, but because they are doing the practice for their own benefit alone, they do not achieve full Buddhahood. I don't know more about it than that. And I'm guessing that we'll have to do some digging into Buddhist historic literature to understand more about who the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are. But that's a bit that I can say about them right now. But in the Mahayana tradition, we are on the Bodhisattva path. And there are two kinds of Bodhisattvas: the Bodhisattvas in training and the Bodhisattvas who've accomplished awakening. And so the Bodhisattvas in training are us. We want to benefit sentient beings, and we want to free ourselves from samsara. And then the Bodhisattvas who have actually accomplished that awakening are those who are said to reside on the Bodhisattva levels, or bhumis, of awakening. If you want to learn more about the Bodhisattva levels, you can read Khenpo Karthar RInpoche's book, Dharma Paths, where he explains the whole path of the Mahayana, the 5 paths of the Mahayana, how a person develops themselves through the 6 perfections, and then what happens when people reach the 1st, 2nd, 3rd through the 10th bhumi of Bodhisattva awakening, and then what they do when they become full Buddhas. That's all at the very last part of Dharma Paths. So if you don't remember that part being in the book, good time to review it. Good time to review it, because every time you review it, you'll learn a little more. Finally, in the Vajrayana tradition, the essential nature of yourself as the teacher and the students, and in fact of all beings, is the nature of the wisdom deity. All beings are wisdom deity, basically, is what he's saying here. And what this means, this all beings are wisdom deity, is that all beings have Buddha nature. All beings have Buddha nature. There's not a single being that does not have Buddha nature. And so as a result, all of them are of the nature of wisdom. And so and he says here, but because of our deluded, confused minds, we haven't realized this, and all of us are projecting our confusion upon one another. And somebody told me once that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche really lived this, in that one of his translators said to me once, "You know how hard he works for us. He works so hard that he sits up at night and thinks, well, how can I help this student? And how can I help this student? And how can I get through to this person? And how can I get through to this person?" And he said, meanwhile, he is all at the same moment visualizing all of them as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so in a way, they see us as we naturally are already. So since we're projecting confusion, the aim in the Vajrayana is to eliminate that confusion. The teacher wants to introduce the fact that the wisdom and all the superior qualities that we search for and long for are nothing beyond what is already within ourselves. In the Vajrayana tradition, the teacher presents the Dharma with this attitude, so as the desire to impart this knowledge. The slight difference between the first 2 vehicles, the Mahayana, the Hinayana, and the Vajrayana, is that in the Vajrayana, you're presenting the truth that the quality we are looking for is none other than our own nature. So that's the slight difference. It's our own nature. And that because of our confusion, we look for this quality outside ourselves, or seek methods through which we can acquire it from outside ourselves. In truth, this quality is already within us. There's no need to search for it, to externally try to obtain it from someone else. Those are the basic differences of the 3 vehicles. On one hand, these approaches seem to be contradictory. On the other, they don't contradict each other at all. Khenpo Rinpoche used this example one time. He used the example, and I'll type this in chat. He used the example of a gem dropped in a sand pile. So he said, our Buddha nature is like that gem. That's been dropped in a sand pile. He said there are two approaches, what he calls the Sutrayana, which is the Hinayana and the Mahayana together. The Sutrayana approach, the Hinayana and the Mahayana approach, is to their approach is to carefully remove all the sand. So they would, so through the Hinayana and the Mahayana is that like our Buddha nature is in there somewhere. And to get to it, we got to get rid of all the stuff that's not Buddha nature. So here, let's get rid of all of our negative karma. Okay, let's get rid of all our bad actions. Let's get rid of all of our confusion. So it's like they're taking scoop after scoop after scoop of sand away from the pile, eventually allowing the gemstone to shine forth. So it's laborious, takes a long time. And it can become discouraging, but that's the Sutrayana approach. This is the approach the Buddha described when he taught the sutras. The sutras it literally means words of the Buddha. And these are the texts that were based on the Buddha's oral teachings that were done during his lifetime. There are several different types of sutras. But I won't get into all that now because it's a little bit much. But safe to say that the sutra approach is that our Buddha nature is hidden in the sand pile and that we have to scoop away all of the sand in order to expose the jewel. On the other hand, the approach of the Tantriana, approach is to plunge one's hand into the pile and pick out the jewel instantly. So that's kind of tough. So you have to, that's the approach in the Tantriana. Instead of saying your Buddha nature is underneath all that sand and you got to carefully move all the sand away, in the Tantriana approach, the message is, look, you're already Buddha. Do it. Just manifest your Buddha nature right now. And this is a little bit more. It's a little steeper of an approach. It's a little steeper of an approach. Shall we say, you have to know a lot, because how do you know where to put your hand? Where to plunge your hand into the pile? How do you know where to plunge your hand into that pile? This is why in Tantriana, the teacher is important. Because without the teacher's instructions, you won't know where to plunge your hand to pull out the jewel of your Buddha nature. And this relies on the teacher having some supercognition and knowing us better than we know ourselves. And so they tell us where to look. And this is done in several different ways. One way that it's done is through the practices of mantra. And many of you will remember perhaps in the past, attending an empowerment where you're given either a stick or a flower and you cast it on a mandala. And where that flower or stick lands, that indicates the Buddha family with which you are you're attuned, and that you can then choose a deity from that Buddha family to practice. Khenpo Karthar RInpoche, he himself did not give these empowerments where this kind of divination was done, because those types of empowerments have to be given by very, very high lamas with a great deal of realization. And so he himself never gave them. But what he would do, and he told me that this is something that I could do, he said, talk to people, find out what their interest is. He said, frequently, he said, when they express an interest in a specific deity, that gives you a place to start. Now, I'm sure he himself could look at all of us instantly and know what our Buddha family was and which deity to give us and which mantra we should do. But he advised me to just talk to people and to work with them to find out what their interest was. And if they had an interest in a specific deity, that we would explore that together and that eventually they would find their practice. It's a little more circuitous, but we would eventually get to a good result. The other method that we use in our tradition to uncover the Buddha nature instantly through the teacher's guidance is the practice of Mahamudra. Mahamudra is what follows. Jeff, you were asking what follows shamatha. What follows shamatha is an exploration, a general exploration of mantra practice and a general exploration of bodhicitta practice. And after thoroughly exploring bodhicitta, Khenpo Karthar RInpoche suggests that after bodhicitta, after one does shamatha, one should take up pretty much quickly and immediately what he called the lojong or mind training tradition. This is taught in books such as The Great Path of Awakening or the 7-Point Mind Training or the 8 Stanzas of Thought Transformation. There are several systems of lojong or mind training. And what are we training our mind in? What is that lojong formed for? I mean, what is it created for? It's created to help us realize our bodhisattva motivation. Understanding relative bodhicitta, aspiration to be a Buddha, and the action of taking on the 6 perfections as a practice. And also the practice of ultimate bodhicitta, which is understanding the nature of mind. So when I train people in lojong or mind training, we start with the meditations on Tonglen, sending and receiving, compassion meditation. So Khenpo Rinpoche said that we would start everyone with shamatha. And then after shamatha, we would teach people Tonglen, the love and compassion meditation. Some people we would teach at the same time, we teach them Chenrezi mantra because it's really accessible, so easy and so profound. And then after having learned these, then we would figure out with the student if they wanted to pursue the Mahamudra path. There are several ways to pursue the Mahamudra path, one of which is to do the traditional Mahamudra Nundro practice. And after one finishes the traditional Mahamudra Nundro practice, one would practice Mahamudra Shamatha and Mahamudra Vipassana. And that's where Vipassana arises. It's after a person is prepared and begins their Mahamudra practice. So it's a bit of a long path, but many people have actually done it. I think there are about somewhere between 40 and 50 people that I personally know who have finished their Nundro and have undertaken Mahamudra practice in one of its ways. But Khenpo Rinpoche also taught Mahamudra to people doing Chenrezig practice and Tara practice and so on. So there's more than one way to approach Mahamudra Shamatha and Mahamudra Vipassana. So that's the general progression. I hope that was helpful. Jeff, did that answer your question about what's next? You might have to unmute, sorry. Okay, cool. Okay, because we start everybody with shamatha because it's the easiest. And it also helps us to understand what people's capacity for learning is and what their capacity for practice is. Some people don't like shamatha and prefer to do mantra practice. We have to recognize that that's a thing and it's okay. It's okay if people don't take to shamatha. It's okay if they practice their shamatha in the context of mantra practice, because Jamgon Khantrul III, when he was teaching at KTD, probably 1980, in the summer of 1980, he was asked a question. He was asked by a group of students who said, well, how do you, I mean, the person asked it really nicely, but there was like a little bit of a barb behind the question. It's like, where do you get off teaching people profound Vajrayana methods before they've finished and fulfilled their shamatha practice? I mean, it wasn't exactly a barbed question, but that's where he was coming from by the way he asked it. Jamgon Khantrul III was very, very patient. And he said, I understand where you're coming from. He said, but you also have to understand that visualization practice, visualizing a Buddha or Bodhisattva, that's a form of shamatha. That's a form of shamatha right there. And when you place your attention on the visualized form of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, it is actually a form of shamatha, and it trains your mindfulness and alertness just the same way as sitting on the cushion and watching your breath or doing any of the other styles of shamatha. And in fact, later on, a number of years later, this would have been 2007. I know that because I know that was when I went for my brain imaging tests at Princeton and so on. The lab assistant who was working with me at Princeton said, you got to tell me something. Where are the Tibetan meditators? Where are they? Are they like living in caves or something? I've never seen them. Where are the great meditators? What are they doing? I've never seen them in my study. Where are they? And I said, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer, but let me go ask Khenpo Rinpoche. I bet he knows. And I went and I asked Rinpoche, and he said, well, you know where they are? He said, they're up there doing mantra. That's where our most serious meditators are. They're doing mantra practice. And so if he wants to study some brains, have him study the brains of mantra practitioners. Because if they've done their 10,000 hours or whatever the scientists are looking for, if they've done mantra meditation, it's the same. It's all shamatha. But interestingly enough, Bokhar Rinpoche, in his book, Chenrezig, Lord of Love, he goes a little farther than saying it's a form of shamatha. He says that that the visualization of a deity as being empty inside and yet appearing with a skin of light, he said that is actually vipassana practice. He said you are honing the same understanding that vipassana is honing. And so if you really want to, if anybody here is interested in this, I can study the book Chenrezig, Lord of Love with you, because he gives like a progression of 10 meditations to do when a person is reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, and a couple of them are vipassana meditations. So it's, so I'm hoping that this is interesting and this gives you a picture of what's coming, of what the coming attractions are for our students at the KTCs. Everybody starts with shamatha. Some people will like mantra practice and gravitate toward it. We should let them do that. And some people will gravitate toward shamatha practice. We should let them do that. But everybody has to learn bodhicitta. Everybody has to learn bodhicitta, because without bodhicitta, Khenpo Rinpoche said, Mahamudra won't be successful. If a person doesn't thoroughly internalize bodhicitta, he said the rest of their practice really won't. He said even if they practice the highest Vajrayana, it's not really going to go anywhere, because they won't be coming from the right motivation. So training in that bodhisattva motivation is essential. That may seem like I've just gone off track on our subject, but not really, because these are things that you absolutely will benefit from knowing as individual practitioners and also as teachers of Dharma, is by knowing the lay of the land and how it's laid out. So questions, what do you guys think? That's a lot of information. You all right? Yeah, go ahead and unmute your microphone and ask. Yeah, go ahead and unmute your microphone and ask. Stephen?
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to make sure the definition basically of shamatha is calm abiding.
Correct.
In English, right? You're staying with the calmness or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
What would be a definition of Mahamudra? What would you say is a simple English term for that?
Yeah, sure. Maha means great. Okay. Maha means great. And mudra has like many, many different meanings, but Khenpo Karthar RInpoche said the one that he selected is seal. Mahamudra is the great seal. And that doesn't really make sense, because then it sounds like the great seal of the state of Ohio. I mean, what's that, right? And so I prefer to use a different meaning. I mean, the meaning of seal here is authenticity. The meaning of seal here is authenticity. So it could be called the great authenticity. Nobody calls it that. You know, nobody calls it that. So Mahamudra is the great authenticity. And what are we doing? We're meditating on the nature of mind itself. And that's really what Mahamudra meditation is. And Mahamudra meditation is meditating on the pure, clear, empty nature of mind. But you need technique. You can't just say to somebody, meditate on the empty and luminous nature of your mind and expect that to go anywhere. You have to have received from your teacher the transmission of the techniques. And once you receive from your teacher the techniques, then you practice them. And then when your teacher gives you the okay, then you can start teaching it. Does that make sense? Did you have any other questions about that? Any other questions about that? Okay. All right. Got it. Okay, good. Other people have questions. Go ahead and unmute. Oops, sorry. I hit a button by mistake there, sorry. Okay. No other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So visualization. So, I am doing visualization, but I can't hold them for very long. So am I deficient, or how to,
Yeah. Trungpa Rinpoche has talked about this before. He said we have to understand several things. Number one is that visualizations are done with the sixth consciousness. So that's called the mental consciousness. And he said the sixth consciousness is the mental consciousness, is the part of our mind that thinks about things and knows things. And so this is different from the 5 sense consciousnesses: our eyes, the nose, the tongue, the skin, and the ears, okay? The hearing and so on. All of those perceptions come through the organs of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, and sight, so it comes through the organs. And then there's a mediation in between them. And then images of those things or perceptions are received in the sixth consciousness, which then conceives of them and thinks about them. That's the process of perception as it's described in the sutras. They call it the 18 extensions of the senses, which it has to do with 6 consciousnesses. If you count the mental consciousness, the 5 senses and the 6th, which is thinking. And how do they get to 18? Well, there's 18 factors involved in perception. There is the object of perception, the perceiving organ, and then the perceiving sense consciousness.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard those. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we get 18, because there's the perceiver and what's perceived in the process. Okay, so we have that. Now, in visualization, you're only using the mental consciousness. You're not using anything else. And so he said, because you're creating the images in your mind, he said, it is impossible, and I will repeat that word, impossible. It is impossible for the image you create in your mind to be as clear as what you see with your eyes. So, okay, so it's impossible. So remember, we were talking about expectations of ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we have the expectation that our visualized deities are going to be just as clear as what if we see a picture, it's not right. That's an improper expectation. So, okay, so and this is why I love answering this question, because I answer this question many times in a year, because it's a common, incredibly common misunderstanding. And so, okay, so you create an image with your mind, but because it is not being seen by your eyes, it will never be as clear as what you see with your eyes. But there's also the idea, and Trungpa Rinpoche talks about this, and I believe he talks about this in his book on creation and completion, which you can download from the internet for free. In that book, he says that because we are not good at shamatha yet, he said, parts of the deity may disappear. You'll have the head, but you'll lose the torso, or you'll have the torso, but you'll lose the head, or you have the whole thing and it moves over there, or you have it on top of your head and it slides off, and he just says, this happens because it's a mental consciousness thing. Number one, and it won't be as clear. And number two, our shamatha is inconsistent. When you sit in shamatha, how many times do you notice you're distracted and have to bring your attention back? A lot, right? And each one of those, a lot, where you have to come back because you wandered, is what happens when part of the deity disappears or changes. So if we're distracted, even for a moment, the deity is gonna look different or do different or be different, and some of it will be mischief mind. Some of it will be what I call it mischief mind. I don't know what it really is, but I call it mischief mind, where we want something so much that we goof it up. We want something to be perfect so much that we it's kind of like when you want to carry that egg so carefully that you break it, right? It's like where we apply too much pressure to our mind as we're trying to train ourselves in something. And this is why gentleness is so emphasized, is because that gentleness will allow us to be gentle with ourselves. And if we don't have a habit of being gentle with ourselves, we're just going to have to do it longer. That's all.
Okay.
It just, so I don't know. Does that help some?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. I have a comment on what you were just talking about with visualization. Their neurologists are working on this question of mental images, and people vary a lot in their ability to visualize.
Okay.
Some people have really vivid mental images, and at the other extreme, there are people who cannot visualize at all, and then there's a whole range in between.
Right.
And that's you're stuck with that. That's the way you are.
Yeah. So see, so I call this. I thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I would call that a. Let's see if I can find chat here. Here it is. I would call that a karmic preset. Right? It's a preset from your previous lifetime. And so you might have a karmic precept to have clarity issues. But here's something interesting that Rinpoche told me. He said, don't worry about the clarity. He just said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about whether it's clear or not clear. He just said, know that the deities or the gurus or whatever are there. You know, so the know that they're present. And Lama Namse, who was Karmapa's representative in Canada, he passed away a number of years ago. He said something similar. He said, well, you know, I said, sometimes I get tired attending to all of the details on the form of, you know, of a deity. And he said, I understand. He said, don't worry. He said, it's a happening anyway, whether you attend to it or not. So basically what I know, and it's like that, like blew my mind. So basically, because what I was talking about was the practice of white Tara. And those of you who've read Khenpo Karthar RInpoche's book on white Tara knows that you know that when you're visualizing white Tara, you are white Tara also, and lights are coming from you, and then they're doing things to the universe, and then lights are coming back to you, and they're making things glow. And I mean, it's a very complicated practice. And I would get a headache, you know, and body aches from doing this. And I asked Lama Namse, what do I do? Because it's like making me hurt. And he said, well, you know, he said it in the nicest way. You're trying too hard, you know. And you know, and he said, you don't have to attend to it that tightly. He said, it's going on whether you are attending to it or not. Just know that it's happening. All of that, you know, emanating and, you know, so forth, and blessing and all that. Just know it's happening and don't worry. And that really helped me a lot. So I know that took us maybe a little far afield, but not too far. Other question, yeah?
Let's see, yeah. So speaking of visualization and such,
Yeah.
like in Taming the Tiger, there's a number of sort of exercises for meditation. This is just, do you have some comments on that kind of?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people connected during his lifetime. A lot of people really connected with Akong Rinpoche. I mean, he was a genius. He really was a genius. He is, of course, people who know the story of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche's escape from Tibet will know that Akong Rinpoche accompanied him on this trip, and that the two of them settled through the work of Frida Betty, an immigrant English woman who lived in India. She sponsored them to actually go to England, to go to an institute of higher education in England. I can't remember if they went to Oxford or where they went precisely, but I mean, it was quite a thing. And then after that, they founded the very first Tibetan center in Britain, I believe, up at Samyeling. And so after Trungpa Rinpoche decided to go to America and do his own brand of Buddhist teaching, he wanted to teach in English and so on. That left Akong Rinpoche in Scotland. And while Akong Rinpoche was working on his presentation, he developed a series of exercises that were that he called Buddhist psychology or psychotherapy, Buddhist psychotherapy. And he developed something called the Rokpa, I think it's ROKPA, the Rokpa school of Buddhist psychotherapy. And the book, Taming the Tiger, was the first book in the series of books and materials that he used to train his Buddhist psychotherapists. And then when he was in Columbus, he was invited by one of the Rokpa students to come and teach at the Columbus KTC. And I believe he taught at the Columbus KTC somewhere around 1984 or 1985. I get the dates mixed up in my mind. It could have been earlier, it could have been later. But he taught the first exercises in that book to us. And I'll tell you what I learned from doing those. I think the first 3 or 4 exercises where he's teaching people deep breathing in order to relax, and then a body scan meditation to help to relax the body, and then the exercise that he called, I think, openness, where you imagine that all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are going through a gate in space and then turning into the golden light of universal compassion. I think these are incredibly deep methods. There's a lot of beauty and depth in these methods. And I think they're not for everyone. They're not for everybody. I was never able myself to practice all of them. I didn't have the patience to sit and carefully practice each one. And I also didn't have the guidance of a Rokpa teacher, which probably would have helped keep me on task a little longer. But I think that they're valuable. And I don't know if anybody is teaching them in the US right now. But I think that he did intend for that book to serve as a standalone for people who wanted to learn those kinds of exercises, because there was one called, I think, Friend, where you imagine a person you really care about and maybe have expectations of as being made of light and disappearing. So, I mean, it's, you know, and something you value, like something that you're materially attached to, it becomes nothing and disappears. And in this way, he tries to help people recognize the insubstantiality and the impermanence of everything in a way that is healthy and not unhealthy. There are unhealthy ways to talk about emptiness, and I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow in my Dharma talk at Columbus KTC, the Dharma talk I'm giving. But I think that he was attempting to help people let go of unnecessary clinging and fixation in ways that were healthy, as opposed to ways that were unhealthy. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I admired him greatly. He passed away a number of years ago. But I wish he was still in this world, because I'd write him a letter, and talk to him about everything. But I don't know if that was what you were looking for.
Oh, that was, yeah. I've actually tried the disappearing thing with objects and so forth as a, to improve my visualization skills, which are marginal.
Is that true of all of us?
But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting set of exercises that, I don't know, since this is a teaching thing, I was wondering if any of those had any relevance. They certainly were different from what I normally read about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and it was his own, he actually devised this himself.
Oh, okay.
He devised it himself. And so, and because he was a tulku, he could devise things. You and me, we can't make up our own meditations. It's probably not a smart idea. Unenlightened people making up meditations, it's got some, possibilities of mistakes in there. But a tulku, especially one with as many qualities as he had, they are free to do these kinds of things where they devise things that will help others. And so, so I appreciate you bringing him up. That's a nice memory. I wrote him several letters over a period of about a year, and he sent back answers and so on, because he had us do drawings. And we could draw anything in any way, and we gave him the drawings. And then he actually analyzed us. He did psychoanalysis based on our drawings, and then gave us remedial drawings to do. like do like waves or something, or do this or do that in order to, yeah, it's really, really interesting. I did that for about a year, and then I went into retreat and things, I kind of lost track, but it was great because of the, yeah, I know. I feel like I've been a very fortunate person in my life, and whoever I was in a previous life, I can say shame on you to the person I was in a previous life, because they did so many negative actions that I have health problems. Okay, they did a lot of negative actions, but I can also be incredibly thankful to this person I was in a previous life and say, thank you so much for doing so much dharma that you had connections in this life with so many holy beings. It's like, thank you, person who I was in a previous life. Thank you so much. And may the person in the future not be too mad at me. Anyway, you get the idea. All right. Because of time, we're going to have to begin to wrap up here. I am going to hold you about 5 minutes past the top of the hour, if that's okay with everybody. It'll just be 5 minutes, because I would like to share one more thing, and then I will answer a couple of the other questions that you had. I just want to kind of get started on something here. Boop, boopy doop. I wasn't smart and didn't look this up ahead of time. Oop. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh, ba-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Okay, very good. I think I can, yeah, I can do that. All right. Trying to learn how to use Zoom, it's a thing. Even after all this time, right? We're still trying to learn Zoom. All right, here we go. Share the screen. Oh yeah, it's going to do that, is it? All right. Well, okay, so how am I going to handle that? I think this is, no, that's the mail. That's Chrome. There's, oh, here it is. I found it. It was just not in the place I was expecting to find it. Okay, so the objectives for instructors here. I just want to cover this briefly. When we were, next time we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of teaching meditation. And so that's what we're going to cover next time. But I want to get it started today by talking about the objectives, and I can't do that thing, that highlighting thing here without danger. So I'll have to wait until I get a PDF, and I can then do that highlighting thing, which I like so much. Our overall objective is to orient students to tranquility meditation and give instructions and experience in practicing it as taught by Khenpo Karthar RInpoche. The detailed objectives are briefly introduce what Columbus KTC is and the Buddhist view underlying meditation practice. And so these objectives, this objective document is for meditation teachers to read. This is not for the students to read. And we explain karma, Taeksum Choling, as being the name of our center, as being a definition of what we do, or a description of what we do. And karma means we're of the Karma Kagyu lineage. Taeksum means 3 vehicles, means we practice Hinayana methods, Mahayana methods, and Vajrayana methods. Our Hinayana method is shamatha. Our Mahayana method is Tonglen. And our Vajrayana method is mantra practice and Mahamudra. And Chu Ling means Dharma place. So it's place of the Buddhist teaching of the 3 vehicles of the Karma Kagyu tradition. So we teach 3 yanas, shamatha and Tonglen, and mantra practice in Mahamudra as a way of guiding students along the path and helping them attain the most benefit, whether it's Buddhahood, Bodhisattvahood, or just making their lives better. The Buddhist view underlying meditation practice, we'll be looking at this more in detail next week when we look at the actual outline. The first thing I usually do is I tell people what meditation is not. It's not sleeping. It's not going into a trance. It's not trying to avoid things. It's trying to be with what is. And the easiest technique to use when we're trying to be with what is the breath. But you also can use physical objects. And I will often get out my meditation stones, these small round river stones, and use those as examples of visual object. The ninth Karmapa used small stones in one of his books. He said you could start a shamatha student with small stone as a visual object. We'll talk about all that next time. But placing our attention on an object and then bringing our attention back when it wanders, that's the Buddhist view underlying meditation practice, is that we're learning how to be with what is, how to be with our mind, and how to be with our thoughts. And so we describe it from that point of view, and that by learning the discipline of meditation, we learn about ourselves. Then next, we present instructions on the physical posture and the mental technique of tranquility meditation. Then we practice this meditation for a few minutes together. And then we discuss a correct practice of tranquility in further detail. Then we review the benefits of tranquility meditation and then explain how to practice at home and how to practice at the KTC. And then we conclude by inviting questions and discussion. And the key words that we use are the name of our center, the Karma Teksam Choling, and then the name of our home monastery, Karma Triana Dharma Chakra, and they have exactly the same meaning. Karma Teksam Choling is the Tibetan word for place of the Buddhist teaching of the three vehicles of the Karma Kagyu tradition. And Karma Triana Dharma Chakra is the exact same name in Sanskrit. Shine and shamatha have the same meaning. Shine is Tibetan, shamatha is Sanskrit. Now, some people may ask, why are we giving both of these names in Sanskrit? And the reason is because the Tibetans have great reverence for what they call the Holy Land of India, because that's where the Buddha was born, gained enlightenment, and passed away. They often will pay tribute to the teachers of the past by using Sanskrit words to continue to honor the connection between India and Tibet. So that's, I wanted to at least cover the objectives and what we're trying to accomplish in Introduction to Meditation class. Anybody have questions about this part? It's actually kind of pretty straightforward. If you do, you can unmute and ask your question. Well, if not, I have two questions that were not covered today. One of the, actually three that weren't covered, and one of them will be covered next week. That'll be your questions, Sue, about the brief overview of meditation and how we will teach it in the class, as well as how we would review it at the beginning of a session of meditation. So we'll talk about both of those next time. The best audience for this, which was Catherine's question, I think, and then actually I can answer Jeff and Catherine's question both together. And that is, what is the audience for this, and how do we work with a secular audience that may be just interested in calming down as opposed to being interested in Buddhism? And I think the easiest way to do that is to use the Guidelines for Meditation, a booklet that I sent as part of the handout packet see if I can see it. There it is. Okay, let's go over to where it is. There it is. Guidelines for meditation. They do give very brief instructions here. He teaches about the importance of meditation and so on. And then he talks about assuming the 7 points of body posture. You can give this handout to your friend, anybody who's interested in meditation, and review this with them. The first, which is sitting, and the second, which is tightening the muscles in the lower part of the body. People don't have to do this. It's just basically, it's a way of grounding somebody on their seat, the second posture. The third is about the back. The fourth is about your shoulders, your hands, and your arms. The fifth is your gaze. The sixth is about the position of your chin and neck. And then the seventh is optional, but if you can do it, to touch the tongue behind the front teeth. Now, what you can do is you can review these with people and then briefly review the technique. I feel like this little handout is excellent for people who merely want to know about the basics of meditation. And they don't have to do everything in this list, but the more of these things they can do, the better. And that they can then return to you if they have any questions, and whatever questions you can't answer, you can pass up the chain and will get answered for them. So does that help you, Jeff and Catherine? Does that help you? You can teach meditation, even though you're not like a certified meditation instructor. You can tell your friends that, I'm not like super trained and everything, but this handout is incredibly helpful, and it's given out at our Dharma centers as a way of introducing people to the techniques. And you can read it. We can try it out together. We can sit together and meditate together, and so on. So that might be a way to go with that. So does that help? Okay. Well, here we are, and it's 5 minutes past the hour. Actually, it's 7 minutes past the hour. So Nancy, were you saying, did you have a question, Nancy? No? Okay, very good. All right. Yeah. Okay, thumbs up. Well, guys, you've you've been great listeners. And I really, really appreciate your being here for this. And what I would recommend this week that you do is go back and review in your mind the important points for you that were important for you from this talk, and write down any further questions you might have. Feel free to share those questions with me before the talk on Saturday. And that when I do the talk next Saturday, I will address as many of those questions as I can get done. Feel free to watch the video, which will be put up on YouTube probably tonight. And if you have other questions, you can write them down. But next week, we're going to dig in to the actual techniques of meditation. And this will hopefully address some of your questions about how are you doing in your practice, and how's your practice? And we can address some of that next week. It'll be fun. I'm sure it will be. And then eventually we will do 2 more classes to finish this up. This is just 2 classes to kind of give us an intro to the topics. And then we'll have to do at least 2 more classes to review the topics and to make sure we understand them. But at least we got it started. Does that help? Any questions or thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, could you put, it's on YouTube, and I can't remember, I didn't get a chance to write down where on YouTube. Where on YouTube is it?
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that let me get that for you. Boop, 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 gotta upload it first, so there's that. Let's see. I tell you what. Oh, there I am. It's going to appear here. And I'm going to put this in chat. At least I think I'm going to put it in chat. There you go. You can copy that. And yeah, okay. Yeah, see you later, Catherine. Thanks very much. Yeah, okay, good. So so then that's where you'll find, but but since it's going to be unlisted, I'm going to have to send you where it is, send you the location of this video so you can watch it. I'll send you, first I'll send you I'll try and upload it to YouTube right now, because it's going to take about 5 or 10 minutes before Zoom makes this available. And then I'll upload it from Zoom, download it from Zoom, upload it to YouTube, and then it'll be available to watch. So thanks. Dedication of merit. Again, I'm just so grateful. Thank you for being here, and dedicate the merit of today's session to all suffering beings, making the aspiration that they are free from suffering, come to happiness, and then to Buddhahood. And that coming to Buddhahood, may they benefit all beings. I'll recite the short prayer in English. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. You have a great
Thank you. Thank you.
afternoon. Yes.
Yay.
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 Yeah, I know. It's like we're getting there. Okay,
Thanks,
everyone.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Okay, bye-bye.
Mm.